I'm Brice Futch,
I'm Spencer Amaral.
and this is The Way Forward.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Way Forward. This is Spencer Amaral, and I'm back with Brice Futch for season 4, episode 3. Right, Brice?
That's right. It's been a long hiatus. I think about 5 months at this point, but it is good to be back.
Well, you were very busy in that time. And so I
Yeah,
know this is a good episode to do a bit of election recap, campaign recap. Kick us off with that, Brice. What's your debrief, your recap of the whole campaign season?
yeah, that's a great question. So I think this campaign has been, first off, just an incredible opportunity. It's been a joy to travel around the district, which is the top half of Cherokee County and a sliver of Fulton County, all of City of Milton and a piece of Alpharetta, and get to know individuals, get to know folks, and talk about what matters the most in life. But this campaign was, first off, one of the things that set it apart, incredibly crowded. We had seven
Yeah.
people running all together, six Republicans, one Democrat, and it was probably one of the most expensive state Senate races in recent years. Folks spent well over $1 million on this campaign if you add it all up, and it's a lot of money. But it shows you that it is an important race. It's an important seat, and these things matter. I think we did well. First time running for office for myself, came in third place here in Cherokee County, fourth place overall. Very happy with those results. We had
Right.
the yeah, we had a we actually raised the most money from individuals, even though we were outspent by our top two candidates by 13 to 1, which is crazy. But we
Yeah.
raised the most amount of money from individuals across the district, which was huge. We came in with just almost 11% of the vote here in Cherokee County, and the guy that won was in the mid 20s. So again, not crazy outnumbered on the vote totals. And then we also had dozens of volunteers that got involved with us and that helped us knock doors and host get-togethers in their homes and all of those types of things. So it's been a really great experience. I definitely think it's something that we will want to pursue again in the future in some form or fashion as the Lord leads. But right now we're really getting behind Jason Dickerson for the moment because Jason is the Republican who came in second place. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on in this episode, but Steve West came in third, and there's currently a recount. Steve lost by 67 votes, incredibly close. And Steve could come out on top, and we won't know until Friday night, which is another day from the time of this recording, because we're recording on Thursday, the 4th. So by the time this makes it out, we will know for sure who is in second place and moving on to represent the Republicans. Or plot twist, the whole thing could get thrown out, and we have to do it over again. That's happened as well previously. So we shall see. We shall
Stuff
see.
happens in a recount.
It does.
It was
It does.
razor thin, like you said. And for those wondering, the runoff would be the top two vote getters, one of which was the Democrat who was
That's right.
running unopposed, as it were, for
Yeah.
Democrat votes. And then, so the top Republican vote getter would be the one to go forward to the runoff. And when you put all the votes together, how would you describe turnout overall for this election?
Turnout was actually probably fairly high compared to what a lot of people thought. We were thinking
That's
it
what I
would
thought.
be somewhere, we were hoping for somewhere around 10% of the registered voters. I think we were closer to 12. A lot of folks were thinking it would be closer to 7 or 8%. So decently high. I think a lot of that can be attributed to the amount of money that was spent. And on the Republican side, and then also on the Democrat side, Democrats are very motivated. This is a very Republican seat, 70% Republican, 30% Democrat. And so they saw this as an opportunity to make a point and to make a statement and get their person out in the lead and to come in first, which they did. And again, because they were united behind one candidate, I think she ended up with like 36% of the vote. And here you have to it's a majority plus one, so 50% plus one. So nobody won it outright. It is going to that runoff. But Democrats are very motivated here. I think that pushed turnout on their side. And then with Republicans, just the amount of money that was spent in those advertisements, mailers, text messages, social media ads, trying to get people out to the polls. Door knocking was huge. Again, using that get out the vote effort. So I think turnout was better than a lot of folks expected. Still very low compared to the total amount of votes in the district.
Well, Brice, you ran a campaign to be really proud of. I got to see this in multiple ways, being at a lot of the forums and the places where you were given stump speeches and the campaign dinners and the fundraisers. And and even going out and passing out literature with you. And I loved seeing it every step of the way, how seriously you were taking this, how you were willing to throw yourself totally into it. And it was really a matter of conviction for you. You felt God had led you to this point to run for office. And I loved the conviction and also the way you were going about the campaign, the vision that you were casting, very family focused, faith focused, values driven. And I really loved seeing you connect well with a lot of voters too, at all the places I was at. It seemed like people really were resonating with everything you were saying, and they saw you as a really fantastic candidate. So you had a great grassroots ground game and a lot of grassroots support that I got to see. And there's so much about this whole campaign that I think you should be massively proud of. Know that all of us who are in your corner are proud of you. And I know that the Lord has wonderful things in store for you, and he's going to continue to use you and work through you to further the kingdom. I have no doubt about that.
Well, that's very kind of you. And if any of you have ever wondered why Spencer is our co-host, now you know he's a kind friend. No, I appreciate that. I do think, it's never easy and it's never fun to lose an election by
Oh
any
no,
means.
never.
But I am very thankful for the support that we had. Very proud of what we were able to accomplish and what the Lord did. And there's a quote that I've been thinking about a lot from a privateer, Sir Barton, from a while ago. But he said, "I am hurt, but I'm not slain. I'll lay me down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise and fight again." And so we are about done with the bleed a while stage and ready to get back in and get involved and help Jason get across the finish line and get this done. So yeah, I think we're like you said, we do have a lot to be proud of. We had a lot of great supporters and made a lot of new friends, and I've been very thankful for that opportunity. And
Yes,
we'll see where we go from here. But you talk about the values thing, for anybody that's been listening to us for any amount of time, that really is the core of why we ran, right? We looked at the field of candidates and said we don't think there's anybody that's really representing families well at this point in the game. And that's why we got involved. We wanted to talk about the idea that strong families build strong communities and strong communities build strong states. There was a study done back probably 60 or so years ago, and it was about what do Americans as a whole value. And at that point in time, the top three things were family, they were stability. I think it was family, stability, and religion, your religious ethos. And fourth on that list was, and fifth were more like money and kind of those consumerables. Now that study was redone about 15 years ago, and that those numbers have flopped, and money and income is kind of the top thing that a lot of people are concerned about. But I kind of reject the premise of that because I think a lot of folks are concerned about money and income because they're worried about family stability, right? They want to be able to provide for their kids. They want to be able to have margin in their life to actually enjoy what they have achieved. And
sure.
I think that's a real driver. We saw this with some other campaigns out west. I can't remember the guy's name. He ran for U.S. Senate, Blake Masters. And Blake's kind of a cornerstone of the messaging of his campaign was that, at the time, I think it was 2020, maybe 2020, maybe 2022, the idea that in America in that time that it was basically impossible for someone to have a fairly high standard of living in the state of Arizona where he was running and not have a multi-family income or a multi-income family. And I think the same is true here, right? It doesn't need to be, it should not be, it's not impossible, but it is very difficult to have a single income family and be able to provide well for your kids and for their future and for your future. And there's a number of reasons for that, but we think that people really resonate with those ideas. And I think we saw that. Had always said for us that this was $100,000 to $150,000 race. We raised, I think it was like $68,000, maybe a little bit more than that. And looking at our numbers and how many votes we got, we were the cheapest. We had the lowest cost per vote of any
Mm.
candidate in the race. And we do think if we had been able to find the rest of that money, that we could have made up the difference and potentially have won this thing because our messaging resonated with people. Our grassroots network was extremely active. The problem was name ID and time before people went to the polls and voted. So I think we were talking to another candidate who was doing some tracking, and they said that we had a solid 4% surge in that last week, and that's when we really started spending our money. We kind of held our powder until that last week, last couple of weeks, and sent out some mailers and text messages and all of that. But yeah, I do think, like we've talked about for a long time, if we're looking for a flourishing society, families kind of have to be at the center of that, and that's why we decided to run on those values. And like I said, I think they really resonated well.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, you put in a lot of the shoe leather kind of work, and I think that contributes to the low cost per vote. But going back to something you said about strong families as the building block of society, maybe it's because I'm an Anglican and I typically see like the both and, approach to
Hmm.
things. Sometimes there's like, I think too much of a wedge placed between, whether you're pursuing healthy families or healthy individuals.
Mm.
Because I mean, I think everybody can acknowledge the only way you get strong, healthy individuals is through strong family systems and support networks.
No,
And
absolutely.
so it takes a healthy community to produce any kind of healthy individual. That's just
Hmm.
how we are, right? That's how we grow and mature. So for you to put your focus squarely on like what does it actually take for us to produce a healthier Georgia, a healthier Cherokee County, a healthier world for our kids to grow up in and
Hmm.
pass on to. That there's such a beautiful realism and pragmaticism to that that I think will continue to be relevant, no matter what the cultural storms around you look like. Like that's always the right place to start these conversations about policy and human flourishing.
No, absolutely. And these are the conservative principles that historically have made the Republican Party a big tent party, right? The big tent attraction was, look, we don't care what you look like, we don't care where you're from. What we are united on is that hard work pays off and that you can make a better life for your kids than what you had yourself. And you can, you can. It is a man's job to provide for his for the family, right? You can put your nose to the grindstone, put your shoulder to the wheel, but at the end of the day, you got to get the government off your back, right? And let you actually produce and innovate and create, and let you keep more of your hard-earned money and all of those things. And when we talk about education, with the prison system, and I think we've talked about this before, but the prison system looks at third grade reading levels and says uses those third grade reading levels to project how many beds they're going to need in their prison 20 years from now. And so if we're looking at fixing our education system, well, one of the main problems with education is that teachers are being asked to be parents instead of teachers, right? And so if we can fix our families, then we can fix a lot of these things that are ailing in our society. Whether that's whether that's people who are despondent, people who are having a lot of just feeling of disconnectedness. That's huge. And gambling
Yeah,
was a big one that came up in this
right.
in this cycle, and a horrific story that out of Johns Creek from just a week or so ago, a guy, a man, husband, father, racked up apparently several $100,000 worth of gambling debt. And what does he do? And this is an extreme case, but he turns around, he shoots his and kills his 16-year-old daughter, kills his wife, and then kills himself. Like, what are we doing? Right? This is and we're talking about this as potentially something that the state wants to sponsor and get behind and champion. Like, absolutely not. Right? We have these vices that we have said are a good, or we're justifying the existence of a vice.
Well, it's a
Uh,
fundraiser.
right, exactly. Right. We're using it
It's a
to promote a
revenue
virtue.
creator.
Yeah. And it's at
You
what
wouldn't
cost,
say
right?
no to revenue, would
At
you?
what cost? Yeah.
Sure, you save, that guy and his family, but you know.
Yeah, but you could have a couple dollars off your tax bill every year. Like no.
Well, again, when you bring the focus back to real people and real lives and the difference we're making at
Hmm.
that level, there's a lot of renewed simplicity and clarity
Right.
to all of these things. And also, like, who really thinks that the government is better at raising kids than parents are? Raising a child into a mature human being is such a mammoth task. It takes a
Absolutely.
family, it takes parents
Hmm.
that are willing to sacrifice day and night for
Hmm.
decades, right? To get them to the finish line. And even then, like, you're going to be their parent for forever. And that's a beautiful, healthy thing.
Right.
It's a lifelong commitment. that is inherently sacrificial. For us to expect the government to step in and fill those kinds of shoes, just it's a bad bet. Like that's
Hmm.
not going to work well. We throw that kind of pressure on our teachers, and that's just not fair to them whatsoever. We throw the
Yeah.
pressure on the school system. We create so many warped expectations too of what is a human being to begin with, and we create
Hmm.
this neutered, secularized version of a human being. It's just a brain in a jar. The
Yeah.
school system can therefore be entrusted with shaping souls because all that's required is dumping a few things into the brain and
Hmm.
off you go to be a good citizen. And it's so much more vast and complex than we're allowing for. And that reality is showing up in just the results when
Right.
we don't have healthy individuals, we don't have healthy family formation, and we're still going to kid ourselves and say the government can get more involved and do more of this better.
Hmm.
These are just mammoth tasks that require people to actually walk sacrificially in a Christ-like way, right?
Hmm.
In their God-given vocations and commitments. And when we live up to that, that's us bearing the burden of freedom well, right?
Right.
That's what
Absolutely.
it takes to have a free society. When people don't carry the responsibility that comes with liberty, there's just no shortcut. There's no workaround. You can't
Hmm.
create a massive government to do the work for us. You're not going to end up with a free and prosperous society. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we've seen that over historical trend, right? We've lost that original idea of what freedom is. We say that, it used to be understood that freedom is the responsibility to do what you ought. And now people see freedom as the ability to do whatever I want. And it doesn't work. Another thing to look at here too, I think, is the way we approach poverty as a whole, right? When we look at, Ellis Island and the the Democrats love to talk about the inscription on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty of "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." Like the purpose of that is not for them to stay tired and poor in a huddled mass, right? The point of that is for them to come here and have the opportunity to work themselves out of that position. It's not to wear it as a badge of pride and a badge of honor. There's another
The different
town.
form of a holy huddle,
Yeah,
isn't
absolutely.
it?
Right. There's another town near here, and they have some government subsidized housing, and they're duplexes. They're relatively small, but they're just in a beautifully wooded area, right next to a park. I mean, just an very idyllic scene. And I think if you compare the folks who currently reside there to the folks who resided in places like that 100 years ago, you would see that the folks who lived in places like that 100 years ago kept them neat, kept them tidy, still worked hard, still tried to achieve, made it their own, right? Took pride in what they had. And now they're just totally dilapidated. I mean, they're overrun with filth, physical filth. Like it's there's dirt, there's grease. I mean, and it's not a good, clean environment to live in.
Right, that's not
And
good for
that's
anybody.
Yeah, and that's on them as an individual, right? The government is trying to say, hey, here's a hand up by providing you with some housing that's affordable or that we're going to subsidize so you can get your feet under you. But the problem is those folks aren't trying to get their feet under them. They're just continuing to live in where they're at. Because I think we've lost that cultural Christianity part of it, right? We've lost that Puritan work ethic. We've lost that idea that I can make a better life for myself in some way, shape, or form. And instead, it all goes back to how can I fulfill my most base desires today, right? We've lost that long-term perspective in life.
Yeah, there's so much of a cultural shift that's happened between then and now. And I think you're right. There were the fumes of Christendom, right, that kind of allowed for some really badly designed government programs. They just put bad incentives into place
Right.
for people, right?
Absolutely.
A bad system can work just fine if you have great people
Hmm.
functioning within it, right? Like a monarchy would be fine if you had a perfect person to be the king, you know?
Sure.
You
Sure.
just have a hard time finding them.
Yeah.
Um, so similar with most of cultural institutions and systems that we have, the problem is if you depend on people to, to rise above the bad systems, generation after generation, eventually you're going to end up with a generation of people that are more the product of these bad systems than not.
That's right.
And then they live into the incentives of the system.
Yeah.
And like, are we really surprised?
Yeah. And Lewis talks about this, right? In Abolition of Man, Men Without Chests. We've removed honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We set up these systems, like you said, that are inherently bad. They're misaligned incentives. And then we're shocked when people don't try and make their lives better within those bad systems, right? Yeah, it's just an absolute mess. A lot more to work on, a lot more work to still to
Yeah.
do.
And there's the whole, the good intentions leading down the wrong path and all that.
Oh
But
yeah.
if we just were more honest, like if we were more humble
Hmm.
and not so prideful in our philosophies and our systematic approaches to things, if we were more humble, we could acknowledge the reality that this isn't working,
Yeah.
right? This isn't producing the results we want to see. And that's not the way most politicians go, Brice, right?
Hmm.
Most politicians hide from the real dumpster fires of their time because they don't want
Hmm.
to get associated with the spectacular failure.
Right.
It'll damage their political clout. And then if they have to address it at all, they take the easy kind of virtue signal approach of like, don't pin me to any like concrete results, but at least I had like, the moral high ground in how I
Yeah.
spoke about this thing. And that's really not important.
Oh,
What we're
sure.
talking about is real lives and real people and a world that we're building for our grandkids, and we have to take responsibility for what we leave behind us.
Hmm.
So, is this working or is it not? There should be a simple clarity to that, and yet that's not the way politics functions.
No, and that's because we're our system of government has has moved from the true representative democracy that it was intended to be to a much more direct democracy. And when you do that, then the mob and the largest group tends to win, and the largest group tends to in they tend to elect people who know that they know are going to support their pet programs or whatever it is that they
Right.
feel they need from the government. That was one of the biggest warnings that Jefferson gave us, and we have totally ignored it.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm despairing. I'm ever hopeful, Bryce, and not just
As
because
am
of
I.
that Christ is about to return. My hope also is in like the beautiful reality that man cannot overthrow the creative order of God's hand.
That's
Like
right.
God created the world and it bears his fingerprints all over the place. And if man in his arrogance wants to continue to run face first into the brick wall, following our own philosophies and
Hmm.
brilliant ideas, it's going to end up with us having bloody noses. And eventually people will start to notice that the emperor has no clothes, this isn't working out so well, et cetera,
Hmm.
et cetera. So I do think that there's always that tipping point. The only question is, can people learn the easy way, or do we have to learn everything the hard way?
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes when you really choose, like, we're gonna have to learn this the hard way, sometimes that means the road back is a very, very long and winding one.
Hmm. It is a long and winding road indeed. Yeah. Well, enough of this. Let's talk about what's next. Right.
Amen. Please,
We're
Bryce, tell me, well, before we talk about what's next, tell me about how you are processing all this and maybe how you think doing that. This was your first time running for office.
Mhm.
How did you grow? How did this change you going through this experience?
Yeah, I think this was a very good opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection, right? There was a lot of mud thrown in this race. And one of the things that we were committed to from the beginning was if we were going to say something negative about another candidate, we needed to be able to cite our source and it needed to come directly from me. It didn't need to be anonymous. It didn't need to hint around an issue. It didn't need to cast aspersions. If we felt like there was something that was legitimate in someone's background, then we were going to talk about it. And I think that was not always easy to do. I think that was a very good thing to have that standard of if we're going to say this is going to come from me, not just written on some mailer from some consultant. I think that really makes you consider first off, I want to be sure that what I'm saying is true. And because it's my name on the line. And two, it's also good for me to make to if I'm the one saying it, I'm also going to be much more cognizant of do I feel like this is too far, right? Because I still live in this community, right? When this election's over, win, lose or draw, I'm back here. And if I'm going to be talking about somebody who has been a public figure in this community, I need to make sure that I know what I'm talking about and I'm not just making stuff up. So I think that was really good. That was a good stretch of the integrity band. There was a lot of temptation to take an easy way out on some of that stuff, and I'm very thankful that we didn't make those decisions.
Yeah, well done.
I appreciate that. And then I think too, a lot of it is stepping out in faith, right? We're not a self funder. We didn't have any real money. I took I was granted three months, 90 days worth of administrative leave without pay from my employment, which made things very tight around the house. I'm very thankful that Brooke did have a job, does have a job, to be able to allow us to do this, and didn't take that for granted. We ran on a shoestring budget both at home and on the campaign, and I think that also required us to exercise more faith in asking friends, family, individuals from the community for their support, right? Because that's if you don't have support from them, then it doesn't matter why you're running. You shouldn't really run, in my opinion. Um, and so I think that was a great exercise for us. And then two, just trusting that, like we said, that hard work pays off. That the Lord does look at your effort, and there's never a guarantee. But I think the Lord was very gracious to us. I think we had a good result. I don't think we have nothing to be embarrassed about. We didn't come in, we didn't go on a fool's errand, and I think that was very good. And then two, just trying to exercise an understanding of peace, right, and resting in who the Lord is and what He has for us, and in different stages of our lives and our lives. And on election night, when things didn't go our way, it would have been really easy to get down and to think, well, we're never going to win anything, and we're never going to go anywhere, and we're never going to, this was all for naught. And I just don't think that's the case. And I think the Lord was very gracious to provide that grace and that perspective early on, and I had a lot of help thinking and reasoning through that, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, remember most of the great American icons in terms of political leadership lost an election at some point along the way, right? Like that's small potatoes, really. Failure is not a thing until we call it quits.
That's right. Was it Churchill says success is moving from failure to failure without a lack of enthusiasm?
From strength to strength and glory to
Yeah.
glory.
Right, right, right.
That's right. That's a great Churchill quote. I loved that you posted the night of the election as well. The classic TR,
Oh yeah,
Man in the Arena.
sure.
That is that's something I need to read on a regular basis
Hmm.
because it's a good perspective shift, right?
Oh yeah.
Reorientation about what matters, who we're really out here trying to please,
Hmm.
and which voices to really listen to, and which voices really like need to be just shrugged off in order
Hmm.
for us to keep moving in the right direction.
Oh,
And
absolutely. There's a great book. Highly recommend the audio version of it because it's by Nixon, who I think I've said on here before
lost a lot of elections.
yes, he did, but he's also one of my favorite politicians and president. He will be vindicated for Watergate one day,
I
but
mean, Watergate looks like such a non-story now.
it really does. It really small potatoes. But he's innocent. Anyway, Nixon wrote a book called "In the Arena," and it's great. There's the audio version is actually Nixon reading it, and it's fantastic. It's an abridged recording of his book. But every time I face a significant setback in life, I go and I listen to that book. And that was the first place that I heard that St. Barton's Ode, or Sir Barton's Ode. But yeah, it's highly recommend that you listen to it if you're looking for some inspiration. At least the first chapter is great. It's just about continuing to overcome defeat and setback, etc. Highly recommend.
Amen. The Sir Barton's Ode kind of reminded me of the knight in Monty Python.
Hmm.
It's like tis only a flesh wound. Slightly less inspirational, but
uh,
that is what it reminded me of. Anyway,
that's good.
yeah, Brice, tell me about what's next.
Yeah, so we're
Post-election, you already talked about, you're still kind of involved with supporting Dickerson and you're going to
mhm.
be involved with the local side of that. But for you yourself, what is next?
Yeah, like you said, we are all hands on deck supporting Jason. I think he's a great guy. I think he's done really strong work in the community. I think he'll represent us well. I think he's our guy, and we need to make sure we line up behind him and get it done. Definitely, and this is going to be a much smaller turnout election for this runoff. It was already like the law was already set, so it wasn't intentionally put on the state, but it's going to line up with Cherokee's fall break. And so it's going to be a lot of folks are going to be out of town. A lot of folks are going to be traveling.
Right.
So you got to make sure that we get out an early vote if you're going to be out of town. But yeah, Jason's our top priority right now to secure the seat. I also think he's going to do a much better job than our former senator did. So I'm very happy about that and happy to see him there. But yeah, so I think Jason's a step up. I think it'll be great. Looking forward to supporting him. And then two, we're back. Ideally, we're going to be doing this podcast again more regularly, like we
Yeah,
were. We were putting out close to an episode a week. We do try to do this on a more seasonal basis, so there's less of that, heavy requirement for consistent content. But just hang in there with us if you're back and listening again. We will try and keep it fairly consistent as we can. Looking forward to doing this with you. And then we're staying. I'm still a fireman. So that's still my main job. I work in two different departments, trying to make up some of this money this income that we lost running this race. And
right.
so we'll be very busy with that. But then Stand for Georgia Values is still online. Both our foundation and our action arm, which are, if you're not familiar, we're a 501c3 and a 501c4 that's pro family, pro business, pro public safety. The 501c3 educates on these issues, and the C4 advocates for positive change in these issues. The C3 has a training program for young leaders. We identify college students, recent college grads, and through a partnered organization, we put them through a week-long intensive up in Nashville, Tennessee, and then they have to compete to get into a year-long fellows academy type thing. If they're interested in doing that. And then our goal is to bring those people back here to Georgia and keep them involved and engaged here locally, whether that's in the state house, whether that's with a statewide organization like a Frontline Policy Council, or working just in the job market, working a job and supporting political causes. People that are looking to be on the policy side of things or run for office themselves in the future. Our goal is to help them do that. And so we have 7 people that have already graduated that program. We have another 8 that are in that program for this next calendar year. So we're rocking and rolling with that. And then like I said, the C4 does a lot of advocacy and kind of keeps that network up and moving. So a lot going on. Find us on Facebook. Would love to stay connected with you that way. Stand for Georgia Values Action, Stand for Georgia Values Foundation. Both of those are on Facebook as well. And yeah, we're moving right along. Not we're moving hopefully from failure to success without a lack of enthusiasm or loss of enthusiasm, brother.
Hey, as the Lord leads, we fight the good fight every day, and we
That's
leave
right.
those with them. Yep.
That's right.
Amen.
hmm Well, I appreciate you hosting. Appreciate you asking. And folks, thank you for allowing me to pontificate for a few minutes about my election. This will be the the last time. This was a little bit of a cathartic process to help process all of the data and the outcomes and all of that. Appreciate your patience with us, with me specifically on that. And we'll get back to talking values and issues and all those other things here in the near future.
Appreciate you, Brice. Thanks for making the time today.
Oh, absolutely. We'll see everybody next time.
Talk to you later.